to the old days of Peter Jackson before he became the big director of Middle Earth we all know today. Back when he was like Sam Raimi with his horror films. There was one last one he did, where he teamed up with Robert Zemeckis and Michael J. Fox in one of his final live-action roles to deliver a nice, underrated horror comedy. And we'll be taking care of that today. Ha! What I, of course, totally said, and well, you could see, hey, wait a minute. Why did you just take my line? Who are you? Me? I'm your ghost. Ghost? Yes. The ghost of you. Oh, 'cause I'm reviewing the Frighteners. Well, okay then.
Be thou my vision, O Lord of my heart, not be all else to me, say that thou art High King of heaven, thou art. Hey, wanna play hide and clap?
Hey everyone, it's Don G. Corleone here, and I'm here with episode 25 of Halloween Horror Movie Review 6. And this episode is going to be for, of course, Peter Jackson's final horror film and final film he did before directing the Lord of the Rings trilogy. And would be one of Michael J. Fox's last live-action roles before sadly being diagnosed with Parkinson's disease and sadly having to retire from being in movies, well, live-action movies. And of course, it's going to be for 1996's The Frighteners. And here's a little bit of a subversion, people. I've decided that because of the film's plot, the ghost you saw in my intro is going to be reviewing the movie. So yeah, this review will be done by my ghost, because my ghost wanted to do this review. So I decided, okay, my ghost can review The Frighteners for me, and give me a bit of a break. I've had a bit of a little rant stress right now with all the rants I've had to do, so right there, and well, I decided that, well, and remember, these weren't filmed in chronological order. I decided that I'll just give my voice a break, and I'm going to let my ghost do this one. And I will come back to say the outro, but, alright, the ghost me. Go ahead. This is all you. Good luck, buddy. Hello, everybody. It's Don G. Corleone's Ghost. And, as you know, because this whole background is blue. That's because it's the ghost room. The ghost studio. So, Don G. Corleone's ghost self is blue background and blue filter. So, you heard what Alive Me said. I'm going to be the one doing the review. Yeah, the Ghost of Dawn is reviewing The Frighteners. So, what is the plot of The Frighteners? So, after a tragic accident, Frank Bannister, played by Michael J. Fox, uses his new psychic powers to con people into exorcising their houses. But when an evil spirit appears, Frank may be the only one who can stop this Reaper that could kill both the living and dead. So, as for our reaction to the film, we are reviewing what was pretty much the last horror film Peter Jackson did before doing the Lord of the Rings trilogy, and one of Michael's last live-action roles before his tragic diagnosis. So, having just watched this, and I gotta say, this was a very good horror comedy. And you know, both Alive Dawn, but both actual Dawn and my own self are actually surprised it's not talked about more often. That's the thing. It didn't do well at the box office, and the horror film that most Peter Jackson people are familiar with that he directed was Dead Alive, or Brain Dead. This one gets some attention, but it doesn't get talked about as much. And we're both surprised. So, how was the Frighteners made? So, Peter Jackson and Walsh conceived the idea of the Frighteners during the script writing phase of Heavenly Creatures. Executive producer of the film, Robert Zemeckis, hired a duo to write the script. The original intention was Zemeckis directing the Frighteners as a spin-off film of the television series Tales from the Crypt. But Jackson and Walsh's first draft submitted in January 1994, Zemeckis believed the film would be better off directed by Peter Jackson, produced by Zemeckis, and funded and distributed by Universal Studios, the only major studio to distribute a horror film from Peter Jackson, because you all know the majority of the other horror stuff he did was not distributed by major studios. They were independently made. The visual effects were created by Peter Jackson's Weta Digital, that only been in existence for 3 years. And also, the Frighteners required more digital effects shots than almost any movie made until that time, resulted in an 18-month period for effects work by Weta Digital being largely stressed. And, well, despite the rushed post-production of the film, Universal was so impressed with Peter Jackson's rough crown The Frighteners that the studio moved the theatrical release date up to 3 months. After The Frighteners, though, was officially shot and completed and would be released into the cinemas, it was unfortunately not a box office success, because it barely made back its budget, but it didn't stop it from receiving positive reviews from critics. And it gained a cult following over the years, and it's considered an overlooked work in Peter Jackson's catalog. So, here are all the good qualities in the story of The Frighteners. So, before this film was made, Peter Jackson, who back then, now we all know him as the guy who directed the Middle-earth trilogy, directed the King Kong remake, and was producer of Tintin. Before that stuff, though, before Lord of the Rings launched him into the spotlight, Peter Jackson was giving us a lot of over-the-top splatterific Evil Dead-style treats. There was Bad Taste, and there was Dead Alive, aka Brain Dead, which is another one of my top favorite zombie movies of all time. Before tackling the stuff I mentioned. And co-screenwriter Fran Walsh have concocted one wickedly twisted, complex, and inventive fright film scenario that really blends pitch black humor, horrific scares, and jealously applied special effects. It really has a breathlessly speedy and steady pace, madly carrying an expansive cinematography, typical lively Johnny score by Danny Elfman, an absorbingly tricky and winding surprise line narrative into this dark, unnerving cinematic brew. And it's really refreshing to see this horror feature from the mid-90s that really isn't really targeted for a no-brainer teen audience, as it got the strength of its own grim convictions, delivers laughs and jolts aplenty, and doesn't really try to throw the other out, or try to over-cop out at the very end with some weak, everything gets neatly tied up with a bow conclusion. No, the movie uses an amusing concept and characters that work out comically for the movie, whether it's Frank himself, or whether it's the female lead of the film, or whether it's the two comedic ghost duo that get the best laughs out of the film. It really ensures that the movie, really at all times, really remains an entertaining movie to watch. The movie, its horror is done and handled very professionally well. It's a really good-looking movie with some good early special effects. The special effects in this movie look just as good and convincing. It really gets featured on movies nowadays. The special effects really play a big part in the movie. And special effects in horror don't really have too much of a great combine. Sometimes, don't always have the best combination. This movie is one of the best ways it does it. It's from the fine special effects. In the movie, and another thing, this movie is a horror comedy, but the horror comedy is for the first half. Once the movie progresses, though, it gets a little bit serious and darker, and it shows how difficult it could be to maintain a good balance of comedy and horror throughout an entire movie. But the movie succeeds for about over 90% of the running time, and although the kind of problem is that, to be fair, I kind of like the fun first half a little better, a little more than the serious second half. Because, the fun first half is, where all the strong stuff really happens. Where all the best character development happens. The serious second half isn't bad, but it does kind of falter at times. It does kind of get a little slow in the second half as well. The movie is well cast. Michael J. Fox plays in a very good, entertaining movie role. He really plays his character very entertaining and a very averagely likable character. He works perfectly for the movie, and his character in particular, of course, and has this good character arc where he's kind of this failed psychic hunter that nobody really likes. But then he meets this test subject that could probably finally be his big break. The movie also has some other fine actors like Jake Busey, Dee Wallace, Troy Evans. Oh yeah, even R. Lee Ermey, may he rest in peace, also makes a great funny spoof of his own character in the graveyard scene from Full Metal Jackets. Right there, like, or when he approaches Frank, says, "You're not, hey, what are you doing here? You're not welcome at the grave," and tries to throw him out. And like, and this movie, Jeffrey Combs also plays this other good classic character that's crazy and over the top and also very entertaining. So how do we start off the Frighteners? So our first scene kicks off in 1964, where this criminal named Jared Bartlett gets executed for murdering 12 people and was driven by his ambition. So his teenage lover gets treated as an accomplice and sentenced to prison, but then gets released into her mother's care. And then it's 1990 when the film takes place, where Frank Bannister is a selfish husband to his wife, and during this one argument, Frank accidentally crashes his car into a person's lawn, and the person's like, "Hey, you wrecked my lawn. You know it's coming out of your pocket. Yeah, just email me the bill," and gives him his business card, and then accidentally runs over one of the guy's gnomes. And the guy's like more mad about that stupid gnome being run over. And so, police then later find Deborah dead nearby with the number 13 carved in her forehead. Frank doesn't remember the events. The trauma, though, grants him the ability to see the spirit world. And then, of course, after that, Frank lives in this unfinished remains of the house he was building for Deborah, who's now feeling guilty over her death. And is now this con man who uses abilities to exorcise hauntings staged by ghosts. And there's these like two ghosts he has friends with that are also scene stealers of the movie. We have the street gangster named Cyrus or Nerdy Stewart and this Judge and Ola's gunslinger, and these like the ghost characters are easily such scene stealers in the scenes they're in. Like they're also like Frank's only friends he has, and they also like have some perfect little comic relief moments. Hell, you know, they actually feel like comic reliefs of old animated Disney films. Right, like, you know, characters like Lumiere Cogsworth or Timon and Pumbaa from The Lion King or Sebastian from The Little Mermaid. Like those characters. They kind of feel like they could feel a lot like though if those characters were in a horror movie. These two would be them, and like they're perfect. It's like they have some of the funny scenes of the film, like specifically where they basically use their powers to kind of possess the babies. And they float the 3 babies in the air. Like, this was the film where Jackson really first puts his skills to something beyond novelty films. It's still horror comedy, but he also really resounds entertainment with great characters. And also, like, the film's special effects that get provided by LOTR are very well staged, and they get executed with enthusiasm. Like, it's sad this film didn't perform well at the box office when it came out. I think because, well, to be fair, maybe Universal shouldn't have really rushed the release date, and audiences weren't really too prepared for a hybrid comedy horror with dramatic tension and good drawn characters. Like, there's one time where when the graveyard does come back in the climax, it feels like it's about to climax there, but it doesn't, and it kind of just ends up in another plot twist, but it kind of disrupts the feel and does kind of drag the rest of the film. Like, the twists aren't like random or half-assed and it's fine to have a twist, but to be fair, like when it feels like the climax is about to end, the movie's about to wrap up, it kind of feels like they extend a little bit more. There is some backstory gets sprinkled through with some good frightening character that's played by Dee Wallace from E.T. and Howling fame. Right there, and the film has some good editing, and it does build tension throughout, and I love that the film that introduces plans that also do well work. It's good writing, the stakes are well raised, it builds up the tension. There's great things that are also referenced as well. All that is really well done. Right there. And I do like that the film's not comedic the whole entire film. And at least though the film does try to get to serious horror when it does, once that stuff starts to happen. So Frank goes to exercise the home of this physician named Lucy, our female lead of the film, and her selfish husband Ray. And he notices number 37 on Ray's forehead. And then that later on Ray dies of a heart attack. Frank helps Lucy communicate with Ray's ghost and witnesses this Grim Reaper entity crush the heart of this man marked 38. So Frank flees. It follows this light to the museum, discovers the number 39 victim. Frank doesn't end up saving the number 40 victim, who is this newspaper editor named Magda, accuses him of Deborah's murder, and the Reaper then kills the judge and destroys his form. And right here, like, you do get some other funny scenes. You get the scene where his two ghost buddies cause the babies to float in the air, and like, hey, will you help? Hey, baby, will you help us? Yeah, like the baby just laughs, like, yeah, see, even kids understand us. They float the babies in the air, and then, or when Frank goes to visit the grave, you get the ghost of Arlie Ermey's character from Full Metal Jacket that's trying to throw him out of the grave, or when Ray's ghost then sees his funeral, and then of course he's crying over his dead body, and then of course he pretty much almost falls into his own grave. Like, they got some great funny moments here. They also really do work for the film. So, like, during all these death scenes, Frank realizes that he's implicated in the murder, so he turns himself into the police. Milton Danvers interrogates him, and Milton Danvers is this character who's this unstable agent with the FBI that was traumatized by all the hell he went through working undercover for cults. And so Danvers is convinced Frank killed Deborah, and is inflicting this heart attack deaths in the town. When Lucy does try to visit Frank in jail and bond over shared losses, the Reaper then attacks Lucy because they try to brand her the number 41 victim, and Cyrus and Stuart end up getting killed defending her and Frank during their escape. So unfortunately, the two ghost buddies are pretty much now out of their ghost forms in the picture. So Frank realizes he can't protect her. So he has her induce this near-death experience. It's right there, of course. Well, like right there though, Lucy is the only one that actually believes Frank's innocent, but Frank doesn't really want her to go for the hell he put his wife through in prison, and then eventually she snaps him out of it. And then basically they flee, but the unstable cop tries to stop him and shoot him. And while the two ghosts are holding back the Reaper, when they both kind of get killed by the Reaper, Lucy then sprays a cop guy with a little fire extinguisher. But then, of course, then you get to that whole thing when he realizes that he can't protect her from the Reaper. So Frank has Lucy try to kill him and slow his heart with drugs and place him in a freezer. But originally he wanted Lucy to shoot him. But instead she decides that the whole drug stuff is a much better idea. So when it seems like the whole plan's going to go, Danvers, though, regains consciousness and captures Lucy. At least Frank to die in the freezer. But Frank comes back in spirit and rescues her, and is able to damage the Reaper's disguise. And it turns out this Reaper character that was taken to marked souls is actually the spirit of Bartlett. This is kind of where the climax is kind of going. In a film that's 109 minutes long. For the soundtrack of the film, Danny Elfman does the score so well. The score is also really great. It's also very eerie during the eerie scenes. It's got that Creepshow vibe and Tales from the Crypt vibe. It feels like that's what they're really trying to go for, helping heighten the tension. It's a score that really stands out well. I mean, it's not one of the biggest masterpiece scores, but it's definitely a score that stands out for a film like this. And this movie has a really unique plot about this whole one selfish con artist psychic hunter that ends up having to actually use these tricks for real to help this person that lost her husband, and then pretty much save her from the Reaper coming to claim her next. It's not just a typical horror thriller story. It's got a unique way, and the way the story goes around from the beginning, how it curves back around the past. The flashbacks of the story really help explain the story a lot. There's a lot of good reasons here, that the Frighteners has become this cult movie of a good standing, and why eventually, and you can see why this is a film that likely got Peter Jackson asked to direct The Lord of the Rings after this film. The bonkers plot, the close-to-the-knuckle humor narrative, they make it this good viewing experience, and that's the thing, this is around the time, you didn't expect a director like this would actually go on to make such a blockbuster trilogy, before Lord of the Rings had come out, when apparently everybody likely heard that this guy who had directed mostly low-budget B-movie flicks would be directing a iconic book adapted trilogy, I'm sure everybody was like, what? How's this gonna work? That's what they probably thought before the movies came out. And then those movies came out, and you all remember they blew everybody's minds away. They were all well directed. Everyone was left jaw dropped at all three of them. And to the point where the third and final film, which is rare for a third entry in any trilogy, would end up being the best of the three. And it got him all the Oscars he won for that trilogy. Best Picture, Best Director, and why he's now a landmark in filmmaking today. Like, I don't think anybody expected that day to ever come. But this film was clearly one of the reasons why eventually he got invited to direct that trilogy. The concept is also very creative. And like, it really mixes serial killers with this form of the death is really something to dig well. And the paranormal business Frank runs is also a very clever subplot. So, eventually though, Lucy is able to find Frank and revive him. And he recovers from his revival. And he warns so Lucy warns Patricia, her patient, of Bartlett's return. But it turns out Patricia is still in love with Bartlett and is summoned from hell to continue the murdering spree. And so, Bartlett kills her mother, which, to be honest, her mother was kind of a nasty person in the film. So, it's not really sad she gets killed. Frank and Lucy try to trap Bartlett and flee to the abandoned sanatorium because they want to banish him back to hell. And Patricia and Danvers try to pursue the pair for the sanatorium. And while there, Frank is having visions of the 1964 massacre, which reveals that Patricia got involved in the murders, hence why she got locked up in the first place. It turns out, at first you think like maybe this woman got wrongfully incriminated, but it turns out, no, she was not wrongfully incriminated. They had every reason to incriminate her, because she was involved in her husband's crimes. So I will admit, that is one nice twist. Think of the twist that revealed, I think that's the best one. And it turns out Patricia was evil all along. And this also helps Frank recall that Bartlett's ghost killed Deborah. Patricia carved a number into her forehead. And then Danvers then pretty much releases Bartlett from the urn before being killed by Patricia. And the movie, visually, is very good with the visual effects. The ghost effects look very amazing for 90s standards. Like how all the ghosts look blue, and the ghosts also feel like characters, and not just typical like haunt ghosts that come to spook ya if you're in a horror film. Like, they actually make these ghosts feel like characters to the film. You have the comedic ghosts that are Frank's friends. You also have like the ghosts who are the villains of the movie. Right there, the special effects really do still stand today, especially compared to a lot of shitty CGI we have in today's movies. The effects of the movie look very well. There's a certain level of unique charm to the impression of the movie. Like, The Frighteners is a movie that can be totally watched again and again if you're a horror fanatic. Like, if you haven't watched this movie, you should definitely watch this film. As if you're somebody who loves horror comedies, this is definitely a film I recommend you watch. Like, if you love stuff like The Evil Dead, if you love the Scream movies, or what else can I think of horror comedy-wise? If you love stuff like Reanimator. I mean, now granted, this film is not gory as, well, some of those films at all, because this is a PG-13 flick. It's actually still worth a watch. I would say, like, this was like the most easily, also, it's pretty much the tamest of the horror films Peter Jackson directed, because even the horror films Peter Jackson directed this are excessively gory. Like, Dead Alive is one of the goriest films ever made. Right there, like, that film broke the record for the most fake blood used in a film. So, this was the first time he did not direct a gory horror film. I mean, even though it does have its comedic moments, it still gets dark in the later half, and it's still a dark, exciting movie. It still stands out as a comedy, and also feels like a thrill at the same time once you get to the later half of the movie. You get it like in some 90s comedy feel. Like, the first half, it does feel like films like Casper, but then it turns into this dark comedy thriller, like, once you kind of get to the more main plot of the film and the more finale of the movie. Like, The Frighteners is often a prime example of how to do an action-oriented, fast-paced horror comedy. It moves constantly, doesn't give the viewer a chance to doubt whatever the viewer sees in the film. It's a very plus to this kind of story, and this direction is a very fine statement to show off Peter Jackson's skills with whenever he can direct like ghost-like scenes. in action and comedic timing. And the dramatic elements are definitely very well written. Like Frank Bannister would be a character that would probably be seen as unlikable, but the more the film progresses, he actually starts to get better character development. He gets more depth than usual in a film like this would probably give a character like him, especially with how well Michael J. Fox plays the role in the role, all accompanied by the good soundtrack from Danny Elfman, accompanied by the good direction, by all the memorable moments, by more of the memorable performances, the memorable direction of the film, and the actually really good runtime. So now we get on with the finale of the movie. So during this whole bit, Patricia battles Frank and tries to fatally strangle him, but he pulls her soul from her body and drags her to heaven and forces Bartlett to follow them. While Bartlett frees Patricia, wants to go back to Earth, though, this demonic creature from hell consumes them and takes them back down to hell. So both of them are sent back to hell. Frank gets reunited with Cyrus, Stuart, and Deborah. And at first, it seems like Frank's going to join them, but Cyrus and Stuart are like, no, no. They just told us you're not ready. You still have time on Earth. And they send him back to Earth to live out the rest of his days. And Deborah tells him to be happy. So right there, like, he stopped 2 serial killers, and Frank finally got his redemption right there. Finally redeemed himself for pretty much being kind of like selfish in the first half. New way, kind of redeem himself for not being there for his wife more often. So now he can restart. Right there, kind of start over again. This time now with Lucy this time. And he had a pretty great redemption arc right there. So Frank really redeemed himself. He started off as kind of a selfish con artist, but then finally ended up using his little con tricks to actually stop a real case. And redeemed him. And so he basically redeemed himself right there. And it was a nice way to redeem himself and complete his character development. So, in the last scene of the movie, it's set some time later, and Frank decides to finally let go of the past, demolishes the unfinished house. He starts a relationship with Lucy, who can also now see the ghost, one of the cops that despised him throughout the film, invites him to write this book, but Frank declines, saying that's not his business, and he tells him that he has this ghost thing in his car, that's his companion for that. And the cop's like, oh, you're right. And drives off, and the ghost is like, just staring at him mad. And Lou's like, that ghost looks pissed. And then, of course, it pretty much ends with kind of Lucy chasing Frank. And he had this end credits on, all our times run out. Seasons don't fear the reaper. Playing in the credits. And that's how the Frighteners ends. It was a nice way to wrap up this story. Nice way to wrap up a very overlooked, underrated Peter Jackson film. Now, do I have any bad qualities with the film? So, I would say that, like I've mentioned before, there are some plot twists that do kind of feel a little bit kind of forced. And, well, I would say that when it seems like the film's going to end in a bit of the climax, kind of the climax can kind of drag on for a little bit. And the second half, I definitely like that we kind of changed more to the horror thriller tone the second half of the film. It does kind of slow down a little bit. Really, and to be fair, I think like the comedic first half is the strongest half. Really, kind of the funniest stuff of the film. And what else can I think of? What else can I think of right there? I think that's my bad qualities, really. I'd say gets a little slow in the middle half. Some twists are a little forced. The more thriller stuff doesn't feel as strong as kind of the more comedic first half. So yeah. Other than those, The Frighteners is a very great underrated work from Peter Jackson that is definitely worth the watch if you're a fan of Peter Jackson. Easily also if you're a fan of horror comedies. Definitely give this movie a watch when you get the chance this Halloween season. So in the end, if you love Peter Jackson's horror works, that would totally watch it by The Frighteners for your collection, no doubt. Anyways, that's it for my review of The Frighteners. I'm going to pass this back on to the actual real Don now. It's going to complete the outro for me. Ghost me has had his run. It's time for Ghost Dawn to get back to the afterlife with the rest of the other horror pals, or with the rest of the other horror icons. Anyways, that's it for my view of the Frighteners. If you want to rate the Frighteners, here is how the actual me is going to rank this movie. See you later, everybody. Time to get back to the afterlife. So overall, if you want to see what sent out Jackson's horror career before leading him into Middle Earth and want to see one of his most underrated works, then I'll totally watch or buy the Frighteners for your collection for sure, no doubt. And if we're going to rank the Frighteners, I'm going to give the Frighteners an 8.5 out of 10. Alright, there we go, guys. Actual me is back to complete and this video. So yeah, I applaud Ghost Dawn for taking over for me. So, now tell me in the comments down below what you guys think about the Frighteners if you have seen it. Whether you love the film, or whether you think it's kind of the more weaker of Jackson's horror films. And until then, what's going to be our next episode? So, we're going to the prom for our next episode. Yeah, we're going to prom, people. Because the prom of 1976, by the way. Or 1979, what? Hold on. Let me get this one I'm about to talk about. When was this? 1976. Yeah, we're going to 1976 for this next one. And of course, it's the prom of 1976 that unfortunately massacred with none other than Brian De Palma's Carrie, another Stephen King classic adaptation, and another Brian De Palma masterpiece in horror. Yes, that's going to be our next episode for October 30th. Or no, it'll be our next... You know what? Damn it. I showed the wrong one. That's what I'm watching later on tonight as this was... What I'm actually doing next is People Under the Stairs, alright? And then I'm doing Carrie. So yeah. I guess I now just spoiled what's going to be coming after People Under the Stairs. But People Under the Stairs and Carrie are going to be the next two episodes. So yeah. Until then, guys, that'll be it for this episode and review. Thank you all for watching. If you like this and want to see more, then don't forget to subscribe to Don G. Corleone.